she won't be able to join us, but she was supposed to chair the session today. But I'll just basically have to slot in. And once again, welcome. I know Saturday afternoons is always not the best time, but we normally have, as a Muslim Youth Movement, 3 public talks. And normally we start late in February, but because of Ramadan, we thought of bringing our first public session on a very topical issue, on the Somaliland issue, you know, a bit forward. And yeah, and we also want to, our guest online, as well as Hilal TV viewers, we say Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And we would like to open our event with the recitation of the Quran. تفضل يا شيخ.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إذا زلزلت الأرض زلزالها وأخرجت الأرض أثقالها وقال الإنسان ما لها يومئذ تحدث أخبارها بأن ربك أوحى لها يومئذ يصدر الناس أشتاتا ليروا أعمالهم فمن يعمل مثقال ذرة شرا يره فمن يعمل مثقال ذرة خيرا يره ومن يعمل مثقال ذرة شرا يره صدق الله العظيم.
صدق الله العظيم ونحن على ذلك من الشاهدين. Really, Allah speaks the truth, and we are all a witness to that. Shukran, Sheikh Tahir. Our next speaker is Sabira Hussain, and she will be doing a very short input on behalf of the Somali community, and that is co-hosting with the Muslim Youth Movement as well as Afro-Middle East Center. And of course, this program was sort of at very short notice put together, and you know, both speakers had some input into trying to create, you know, what is the current issues and how the whole idea of Somaliland will impact on the broader Africa and the world and so on. And so I would like to invite Sabira Hussain on behalf of the Somali community just to give us a short input, inshallah.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن بالله ونتوكل عليه، وصلى الله وسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما. اللهم إنا نعوذ بك أن نقول بما لم نعلم أو نتحدث بغير علم. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Respected guests, honorable scholars, community leaders, members of the media, and dear attendees, welcome, ahlan wa sahlan, sodawada. It's truly an honor to see everyone gathered here today. And before we start, once again, we sincerely apologize for the inconvenience caused, and shukran so much for your patience. We gather with humility, knowing that knowledge is a trust, that speech carries responsibility, and that dialogue must be rooted with the truth. Respect and sincerity, that is our intention here. Today, we're here not to provoke, but to understand, not to inflame, but to reflect, and not to speak beyond what we know. So, I stand here before you today as a concerned community member, guided by a sense of responsibility and a care for honest dialogue and collective understanding. And before we delve into this discussion, I would like to sincerely, from the bottom of my heart, thank the South African community for providing a space where respectful dialogue, thoughtful discussion, and peaceful engagement are possible. We are grateful for this opportunity to come here. We are grateful for this opportunity to come here. It's a spirit of responsibility and mutual respect. So, shukran so much. Thank you. And as you can see, today's public discussion is titled Somaliland, Israel's Recognition and Implication for Global Geopolitics. So you might be wondering what's today's program about? Today's program offers a context and informed perspective on the issue that carries significant political, humanitarian, and ethical implication, particularly for the Somali people. Not only the Somali people, the Muslim world, and the broader international community. So as you sit here, we kindly ask you to remain in this space as a respectful person, attentive listening, and constructive engagement throughout the program. Shukran so much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Shukran, Sabira. Well, then we would just like to call upon Sheikh Muhammad Nahar, because we are live streaming, a lot of the Somali brothers speaks Arabic. So I just want him to give some short nasiha in Arabic for our more international guests, especially our Somali community that are viewing us from abroad and other parts of the world. تفضل يا شيخ.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين وبه نستعين على أمور الدنيا والدين، وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. إخوتي في الله، نحن اليوم بصدد وإعلان أننا ضد الغزو الإسرائيلي، الذين ما قصروا أن عاثوا في الأرض فسادا وتخريبا، وهم لا يحبون إلا مشقتنا، كما صرح ذلك القرآن الكريم. يقول الله سبحانه وتعالى في القرآن: يا أيها الذين آمنوا لا تتخذوا بضانة من دونكم لا يألونكم خبالا. والخبال هو الفساد والتخريب. يحبون مشقتكم ويحبون فسادكم. قد بدت البغضاء من أفواههم وما تخفي صدورهم أكبر. ما نراه اليوم علنا من فساد ودمار وخراب ونكبات ضد المسلمين الذي يجيء من إسرائيل هو يسير إذا نظرنا إلى ما تخفي صدورهم. لأجل هذا القرآن الكريم صرح ذلك: وما تخفي صدورهم أكبر. فأشد عداوة للمسلمين اليوم هم اليهود. لأجل هذا صرح القرآن الكريم: لتجدن أشد الناس عداوة للذين آمنوا اليهود 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 والذين أشركوا، ولا تجدن أقربهم مودة للذين آمنوا الذين قالوا إنا نصارى. أحبتي في الله، إن الله تبارك وتعالى كتب مقادير كل شيء قبل أن يخلق السماوات والأرض وقبل خلق المخلوقات. وتعالى في اللوح المحفوظ مصير هؤلاء اليهود، مصيرهم وأين سيكون كيانهم إلى قيام الساعة. ذكر ذلك في القرآن الكريم في سورة الإسراء التي يسميها الصحابة رضوان الله عليهم أجمعين سورة بني إسرائيل. يقول الله سبحانه وتعالى: وقضينا إلى بني إسرائيل في الكتاب لتفسدن في الأرض مرتين ولتعلن علوا كبيرا فإذا جاء وعد أولاهما بعثنا عليكم عبادا لنا أولي بأس شديد فجاسوا خلال الديار وكان وعدا مفعولا ثم رددنا لكم الكرة عليهم وأمددناكم بأموال وبنين وجعلناكم أكثر نفيرا. الأخير: إن أحسنتم أحسنتم لأنفسكم وإن أسأتم فلها. فإذا جاء وعد الآخرة ليسوءوا وجوهكم وليدخلوا المسجد كما دخلوه أول مرة وليتبروا في الأرض وليتبروا ما علوا تتبيرا. الله تبارك وتعالى جعل مصيرهم: عسى ربكم أن يرحمكم وإن عدتم عدنا وجعلنا جهنم للكافرين حسيرا. هذه الآيات ظاهرة وواضحة جلية في مصير هؤلاء اليهود. اليهود عاشوا في الأرض مفسدين، يعيثون في البلاد فسادا وخرابا من يوم نبي الله موسى، فأهلكهم الله تبارك وتعالى وحكم عليهم أن دمرهم وتبرهم مرتين. مرة كانت بعد نبي الله سليمان عليه وعلى نبينا أفضل الصلاة والسلام على يد الملك بخت نصر ودمرهم وأهلكهم عن بكرة أبيهم. ومرة أخرى كانت بعد أن قتلوا نبي الله يحيى ابن زكريا فسلط الله عليهم الكفر الباقين في الأرض. نعم، سلط عليهم الرومان فأهلكهم ودمرهم، ولم تكن لليهود دولة إلى يومنا هذا ولا تقوم لهم. وإن هم عاشوا في الأرض وأعادوا الفساد والخراب مرة أخرى، وعد الله تبارك وتعالى وعدا كائنا مبينا مقضيا أنه سيعيد لهم الهلاك، وكتب عليهم الذلة والمسكنة. وإذ تأذن ربكم ليبعثن عليهم إلى يوم القيامة من يصومهم سوء العذاب إن ربك لسريع العقاب. كلمتي الأخيرة أحبتي في الله: هؤلاء ما يقصرون أن يعثوا في الأرض فسادا وخرابا. وأخيرا ما نراه اليوم في فلسطين في غزة، إخواننا المسلمين يخربون ويدمرون ويطردون بل ويميتونهم جوعا وعطشا. أقل ما يمكن أن نعمل لهؤلاء الفلسطينيين أن نجعل لهم من دعائنا نصيبا. يقول الله: وإن استنصروكم في الدين فعليكم النصر. نسأل الله تبارك وتعالى بأسمائه الحسنى وصفاته العلى أن يقر أعيننا بدمار وهلاك هؤلاء اليهود، وأن ينصر إخواننا في غزة وفي كل مكان، إنه ولي ذلك والقادر عليه. وشكرا.
خير. شكرا يا شيخ محمد. هذه الكلمات. I would like to call upon Khalid Sayed, our leader of the ANC in the province, just to address us with some of the issues in terms of the topic. Khalid, تفضل.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And a very good afternoon to our non-Muslim viewers and listeners as well, and the audience. Allow me firstly, to thank the Muslim youth movement and the Somali Concern Group, AMAC as well, and all the organizers involved in organizing this particular event. I don't only speak as the member and leader in the ANC, where I serve as the leader of the opposition in the Western Cape Parliament, but also as a member of provincial legislature, who is a public representative. And it's important for us, beyond just the topic, that our communities get together to engage. And the engagement with the Somali community is important. We want to thank you, because for a number of years now we've been able to knock on your door and engage. I see familiar faces whom we've engaged with from the time when I was a youth leader, and at very, very critical and somewhat tense periods, particularly in our townships, where many of our members and supporters and constituents are from. You've been able to fill the gap and to come when we've needed assistance. So we want to thank you for that and for your contribution to building a just and equitable Western Cape. Inshallah, may that continue to transpire. But just on this particular program and the topic, I think it's important that there's a discussion. When we want to welcome that, ours is not to, it's not necessarily to impose any perspective, but to indicate that my sense is, and at least from the engagements with the organizers and from the theme as per the invitation, we welcome the fact that the discussion is very much in line with the official position of the South African government, informed, of course, by the African National Congress and other partners. Government obviously sent out a strong statement on the 29th of December on this particular matter, where we noted with concern the announcement by Israel of recognizing Somaliland as an independent state. A very, very dangerous development. Whilst we believe in sovereignty, in legitimate self-determination, such as the self-determination of the people of Western Sahara from Moroccan occupation, for example, and the self-determination of the Palestinian people, we also believe in the legitimate borders that are there. We believe in the independence and sovereignty of states. And Somalia is a sovereign state. Israel has got no right to come to the African continent and determine who has got independence and who are states and who are non-states. So for us, it's a complete anomaly, and we will continue to uphold the position of the African Union on this particular matter. But also it's important, we are all standing in solidarity with the people of Palestine, and I'm glad I see the Palestinian flags. A particular move on the part of the State of Israel, and I'm sure the speakers will allude to it, also speaks to Israel's broader hegemony that they are trying to force, and also to shift the focus and to gain allies on the continent for their expansion and what they are doing in Palestine, and undermining the work that the South African government has done at the ICJ, and that, more importantly, civil society in South Africa, the role that many of you here are playing in the struggle for a free Palestine. So for us, it's not just about Somalia, it's not just about the African continent, it's about Israel trying to utilize the African continent. Not so long ago, they wanted a seat in the African Union as well. So it speaks to a broader and deeper role that the Israelis are trying to play. And you'll notice that by the behavior of some other African states when it comes to what Israel is doing. You'll notice that also at what they are trying to do even here in South Africa, within our communities, where some of our traditional leaders have gone
to Israel and made certain utterances. It's not to be isolated. It's not to be isolated from what Donald Trump is doing in Venezuela as well. So this particular action needs to be viewed within a broader context, but very importantly, we want this to also lay a basis, Buta Muhammad, not only for us to talk about global issues, but to be able to engage with the Somali community going forward also on local matters, on ensuring that we build, as I said, a safer, a better, and a more just Western Cape, inshallah. Thank you very much.
I think, Shukran Khalid, I must say the Somali community has always played an important role. And perhaps it dwindled a bit over time, but I think in a bit of the early days of the 2000s, around there, I think the Somali community played a significant role, both in terms of our local politics. There was also a number of things that we've organized together, including the Muslim Youth Movement, as well as a number of workshops that we've pulled together in terms of business strategies, entrepreneurship, and so on. And that is all the things, inshallah, in the future that we want to, again, cultivate with the Somali community. And within the MYM itself, there's a number of young people that got business opportunities and still running strong. One, of course, one of that was the delivery services, motorbikes that we organized for youngsters to do delivery services in townships, because everyone else is scared to deliver there. So that was one of the key. One of the madrasas that we run, where we were supplied with, unfortunately, also doing business in the townships, have also its challenges with extortionists and so on. So a lot of the things, some of it survived, some didn't, but alhamdulillah, that was all the community has played over the years. And I think we need to, in a way, also rekindle that relationship and some of those ideas. So I just want to invite our two main speakers to the stage. And while they do that, when we put this program together, I think the committee, including the two speakers, was very involved in kind of shaping the program. And one of the things that we thought about is that, while Somaliland and the Somali issue, of course, South Africa, we very focused on Palestine, and you can ask us any question on Palestine. That history we know, but quite a number of other issues we might not be that familiar with, including its history. And that is why, we thought of developing the program in two parts. So the one part would be to map out the history of Somalia, its colonization, and how Somaliland and few other states went for independence. So that is the one part that I think, our first speaker will address. And that is basically understanding the Somali perspective, a Somali perspective on Somaliland. And Abdurrahman would be delivering that first part. Our second speaker will be Naeem Jinnah. Of course, he's no stranger to us, has been an activist his whole life, and I hope he will die activist, inshallah. And Naeem, of course, no stranger even to the venue, would of course look at the kind of geopolitical puzzle. How does this fit into everything else? Is Somaliland issue and Israel's interest, an isolated issue, or does it fit? What is the puzzle, and where does it fit in to the global puzzle in terms of geopolitics and so on? And of course, we will have a question and answer session. I know people might have a lot of questions and so on, but what I want to do is just for us to focus our questions, ask, we're not here to make speeches and so on. If you want to have whatever input, please try to keep it as short as possible. So let me invite you, our first speaker that will be laying giving us the groundwork on Somalia and also the issue of its history and its entire makeup. And I would like to invite also somebody that was very key in the development of this program, Brother Abdurrahman, inshallah, from the Somali community.
الحمد لله الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأن محمدا عبده ورسوله رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. Dear brothers and sisters, Speaker Naim Jina and the rest of protocol saved, the ANC Western Master Khalid, all of you, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. The topic that we are here is a topic that involves not only Somali community or in Somali in broader, but the topic that has an implication to the stability. It is grounds in the continent of Africa. To start with it, in the start of it, I would have liked to give a brief statement before I go into the history, of which we divided into three categories. Somalia before the European colonization, Somalia as the Republic of Somalia, and Somalia after 1991 when the civil war happened and the secessionists appeared. To give a broader, as the rest of the world position and those who advocate for multiple nations in the world, or multiple nations in the world, or those who advocate the global law, we Somalis in South Africa categorically reject the unilateral, desperate acts to undermine the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Somalia and the stability of the continent of South Africa, period. Okay, allow me to give you then the history in a brief way. Somali territories were characterized by a rich tapestry, ancient civilization, powerful medieval sultanates. In Somalia, we had sultanates, very strong sultanates, that had a civilization and a route marine trade network, of which we are a victim for it up until now. That specific marine route that sits at Bab el-Mandeb and the sea is why we are still, Somalis were divided at the first of all, and why still we are victim of this geopolitics is the way Allah bestowed on us and where we sit in the Horn of Africa. That became why we still are on the spotlight of those who want to divide us and rule us in between. European colonies divided Somalia into 5 parts. When we say they divided into 5 parts, before Somalia was one, but had a different sultanates. Somalia map looked like that before the colonization came and divided us into Italian Somaliland, British Somaliland, Italian Somaliland, where is now Somali, East, Middle, and South Somalia, British Somaliland, where is North Somalia, French Somaliland, the modern Djibouti country, Ogadenia or Haute and Reserve area that was annexed by Ethiopian Emperor at the time, and Northern Frontier District NFD, which is now part in Kenya. When the European colonies thought that the Somali people is history and they are people who are fierce in fighting and cannot be colonized, decided to divide them into different parts so that they can rule them. In that manner, when Somalia was divided into these parties, Somalia has started to fight for its independence by different categories. In Somalia territories, the period leading to the independence of British Somaliland Protectorate, 26 June 1960, two primary political parties spearheaded the movement for the independence from UK. The two Somali parties were Somali National League, call it SNL. The SNL drew its maturities and support from a group, a tribe called it Isa clan. And there was also another called it USB. The USB formed part of the interest. There were different groups. There were non-Isaac groups who were called Dulbahante, Warsangeli, and Godobirse. Those ones, they had their own part at the time of independence called USB, United Somali Party, of which still they have that party. If you look their roots now, the Somali land that was divided now itself is fragmenting into the two parties that bring the independence. When Somaliland said we secede from the rest of Somalia, now there were two parts. First time when they came and joined Somalia, the same two parts now, the USB that were the Godobirsis and other ones are still advocating their name being United Somali Front, while SNL, that is in the middle, that I will show in a map. If you look like Northeast and Somaliland inside, that Northeast now, it is on, that is where the map that was used to be a Somaliland north of Somalia. So that Northeast now, it is part of the Federal Republic of Somalia. The other part that you see, Adal, on the other side up, is where now they are trying and they are advocating and their people are not given the chance to decide by themselves whether they want to be part of Greater Somalia or whether they want to be part of the secessionists. Those are in the middle, Tokde and Wakui Galbet, those two provinces. So what Israel now is doing is they are taking the chance that they see the people themselves are trying to go back to Somalia united. So, and they wanted to sit the joke, to sit in Bab el-Mandeb and force Saudi Arabia to accept the normalization, because Saudi Arabia tied the normalization with the recognition of Palestine, and Israel does not want to recognize Palestine. So Israel came up with another idea: let us joke Saudi Arabia, divide Yemen into two, sit on south of Yemen, sit on Somaliland, and then by joking and encircling Saudi Arabia, let us push them to accept the normalization without the question of Palestine. And that is where the geopolitical is coming on this. So the rest of Somalia, when they took independence, then the dictatorship came. And because of the dictatorship, something that is not good happened. Everybody is regretting what happened at that time to North Somalia, where you call Somaliland now. But they were not the only rebels that they started. There was a rebel before them called SSDF, that where we call now Puntland was the first uprising rebels who uprised against the dictatorship of Mohammed Siad Barre of Somali Republic. They were also had their own share of the brutality of the dictatorship. And in 1988 is where SNM, Somali National Army, of which now ruled the Somaliland, came also and uprised. But the brutality that the government of the dictatorship did was not good for anyone, not either South Somalia or East Somalia or West Somalia. Everyone was affected. But we know that Somaliland, or where there is the north now, where you see Togder and Wagoye Galbet, was brutally attacked by the government because they were uprising, while the other one is they were also uprising, but the community were differentiated from the rebels. So the government was attacking the rebels while indiscriminately, unfortunately, these two, because the people of them also uprised. So indiscriminately, the government has attacked them. So in 1999, in 1988, there was another party that was formed called USC, United Somali Congress, that made to topple the dictatorship in 1991. So in 1991, Somalia, the rest of Somalia went into collapse, went into civil war. And 1994, where we call now Somaliland, said we want to have our cessation and secede from the rest of Somalia. But in that cessation, they had no chance to take what you call a poll to ask the people if they would favor for unity or cessation, but only the elders came together and decided that they want to secede from Somalia, not asking the ordinary people their intention or where they want to be. So in that manner, that is why still in where you call Somaliland, adult region, you still have a people that are every day demonstrating and saying nobody is asking us where do we want, and they want to be part of the Somalia. So that is the category and what happened. And the secessionists have two arguments. One was that they said we came to Somalia while we were a government and we united with the trustee, because when they took the independence, they said, okay, we came to you 5 days after North got the independence from British. They came to unite 1st July 1960 with the rest of Somalia that were already in trustees. And they said, we will take back. But there was a unity treaty that was signed that formed the Republic of Somalia. And in that context, that's why the African continent and the world is not in a position to accept that it secedes from Somalia, because there was a lot of other countries who came in that manner, being Tanganyika and Zanzibar, that we call now Tanzania. Tanganyika and Zanzibar also came and united the same way that Somalis united. And then if now they start, it would mean that NFD, that I told you, northern frontier of Somalia, are with Kenya now, provinces, the northern provinces of Kenya. Ethiopia, we have Ogaden region. So if this one is status and the world secedes this part of Somalia, then it's at it started. Tanganyika may say we are no more with Zanzibar, or Zanzibar may say we are not with Tanganyika. NFD, a northern Kenyan part of regions, may say we are also want to secede. Ethiopia, Ogaden region, they may say we want to also secede from them. So it will be uncontrollable in the continent of Africa. That is why Africa took that they will not be dividing the borders that took independence from. And when Somalia took the independence, they were Somali Republic. They were not different too. So, in that context, we, in the perspective of Somalia, we say Somalia is one part and cannot be divided because nobody can allow other body to sit on his neck. Say, I can survive with the rest of the body. So if one wants to sit on your neck and control what goes into your stomach and whatever you are putting into your stomach, it would mean you rather have to die instead of allowing such things. That is the perspective of Somalia, that they cannot allow to happen this thing. We know that in somehow every cessationist has a unique implications. As we say, like sub-Saharan Africa, in Morocco, and Palestine, they have a unique circumstance that is totally different, the underlying circumstances that Somaliland is selling to the world. Because when you want to secede from a country, then you have to come with a proper discrimination and apartheid rules that is forcing you. But out of nothing, because of envy of being a tribalism, nobody can secede from other country because we are different tribes, because all Somalians are different tribes in different categories. So we thank you, all of you coming and attending, and we will wish to engage more in these topics and more topics, as Khalid said, also in local topics and hot topics, and whatever we will shed into light from now on, whatever topic that we think affecting the community in locally, in Western Cape, and how we can attend and analyze together. And we thank you for that, and sorry for the inconvenience. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Shukran, Rahman. And yeah, as we said, just especially to our South Africans sitting in the room, just to give a perspective of how this whole separation and our colonialism in itself came to influence what we have today. And of course, we're sitting, of course, with a recolonization that will be hopefully not taking place in Somalia and Somaliland and many other parts of the Muslim world. I now call upon Naeem Jinnah to give us his presentation. Of course, it will focus more on the global issues as well as the geopolitical issues, inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Don't be fooled by the blank slide. Let me first just start by saying thanks, Khalid, for reminding us of the position of the South African government and the ANC on this issue. But we'd like some consistency. The ANC government appointed a man to 2 ambassadorial positions in 2 different countries, who before he was appointed as an ambassador of South Africa was the unofficial official ambassador of Somaliland in South Africa. Yet the government saw fit to appoint him as our representative in 2 countries on the African continent. Very strange kind of situation. He, by the way, posted a picture today of himself very proudly in the port of Berbera. So please take it up with your party, sort him out. He's also on the International Relations Committee, the ANC, so he does need to be sorted out. Secondly, because everyone else has done so, let me thank the Somali community. While everyone was thanking the Somali community, I remembered I live not from there. Somali community is very active in Palestine solidarity work. And in 2008, Qasim, you might remember this, when they almost beat me up outside the American consulate. That's because the Somalis were very angry and wanted to storm the consulate, and I foolishly tried to prevent them from doing so. They then went to complain to one of the organizers, who happened to be my wife. So I got it from both sides, from the Somalis and from my wife. Nevertheless, let me move on. The issue of Israel's recognition, whatever that might mean, of Somaliland, comes after really years and decades of Israel's intense activity on the African continent. Think about this carefully. When Israel made this announcement that it recognized Somaliland, against the official position of every other African state and of the African Union, the African Union made a statement, South Africa made a statement. How many other African states actually expressed some anger at this? Not many. And the reason is because Israel has been very active working on the African continent, nurturing, cultivating political elites and economic elites on the continent in order to get influence on the African continent. And of course, in order to get minerals, etc., they're very active in the DRC, for example. So this is this recognition of Somaliland comes at a point after much of that kind of work, where they could estimate that they would not get any kind of substantial pushback from African states, and that, frankly, that is what happened. In years gone by, Israel had a policy which they don't have anymore, called the periphery doctrine. There were two important elements of this periphery doctrine, as it was called. One was they recognized all of the Arab states around Palestine as being their enemy states. And so the periphery doctrine was about surrounding these enemy states by states that were friendly to Israel. So that included, for example, up to 1970, no, up to the 70s, it included, for example, Iran under the Shah. It included Turkey, etc. The second part of the periphery doctrine was to target so-called minorities in some of these countries and support them against the state. So Israel supported this, the South Sudanese, for example, in the struggle against Sudan. And Israel was the first to open an embassy in South Sudan when that state was created. It supported and continues to support in some other ways, different Kurdish groups, whether in Turkey, whether in Iraq, through Iraqi Kurdistan, Israel gets a lot of oil, and other such minorities, okay? One is that creates kind of destabilization within these countries, which are its enemies. But the second thing also is that imagine if you create or succeed in creating another ethnic state, whether it's a Kurdistan or Baluchistan or whatever other stan it might be, that gives justification for this ethnic state in Palestine called Israel. It calls itself a Jewish state. We don't accept an ethnocratic state like that. But if they're able to argue that, look, you have this ethnocratic state and that ethnocratic, there's nothing different from us, right? And so you gave the example of Tanzania, but South Africa too. If we were to take that argument to its logical conclusion, well, then I can see that Israel would support the independence of Orania, the independence of the Western Cape, the independence of KwaZulu-Natal, and the independence of whatever little fiefdom that drug chief in the Eastern Cape has. Because again, it would support that argument, apart from the fact that it would weaken the South African state. It would support that argument. Currently, of course, as I said, that periphery doctrine doesn't exist in the same way, but many of those kinds of ideas still continue. And the periphery doctrine doesn't exist in the same way. Why? Not because it's not valid, but because those states that it had previously regarded as enemy states surrounding it are actually now friendly states. All of these Abraham Accords states are now friends and allies of Israel. On our continent, Morocco, an extremely strong friend and ally of Israel. And of course, that's not from today. We know that in 1967, the Moroccans handed over the plans for the Arab plans for the 1967 war to the Israelis. In fact, they gave them a room in the hotel where the conference was taking place so they could bug it and they could have the information. So things have changed in some ways. The United Arab Emirates, Morocco, Egypt is a friend of Israel. Jordan is a friend of Israel. All of these countries that surround Israel are no longer enemies. And so that has changed a little. Now, when we talk about this Somaliland issue, there's a few points about why this is important for Israel. One is that it forces the African Union, so this is not supposed to happen, okay. It forces the African Union to have a debate about something that is not a real debate, okay. Secondly, it assists in this kind of process of splitting states that are or might be enemies or unfriendly towards Israel. Today it's in that same region. Today it's Somaliland. Tomorrow it might be Puntland as well. And the third one is that, and this is an important point, that in many of these issues now, Israel doesn't necessarily act on its own all the time. It often acts with its partners in the so-called Arab world, so-called Muslim world. I don't like the words, but I'm just going to use it anyway. So let me point out. Let me point out what we're looking at. This is Somalia. Can you see my cursor? No, you can't see my cursor. Okay, you can see Somalia at the bottom there, right? That part of Somalia that you're seeing there on that map is what is referred to as Somaliland. I'll show another map in a moment. Okay. But the importance here is not just this country called Somalia, it's this whole area at the bottom there, that the blue part. That's the important part there. So you have the Gulf of Aden on the bottom right there, and then going up the Red Sea, okay? And that little choke point, Bab el-Mandab, is the entrance to the Red Sea. Now, you know how important this is. I mean, the Ansar Allah, during the genocide continues in Gaza, virtually stopped traffic going through the Red Sea, right? That choke point is that important that you can bring the world's economy almost to a standstill by stopping it, okay? Now, recognizing Somaliland, of course, doesn't give the Israelis that much of control over the Red Sea, etc. You know, okay, so they have something there, but what is it really? Now, if you look at this map, this is a map that shows both commercial ports and military bases in that Red Sea area. Now, if you look, yeah, my eyes are not as good as I thought they were. Okay, so this is the port of Berbera in the Somaliland part. Should I use that? Yeah. Okay, so this is the port of Berbera. This is the port of Bosasa, in Puntland. When our brother showed that map, Somaliland, northeast, and then Puntland was next to it, okay? You see two red dots here. These ports are basically controlled by the United Arab Emirates. In Berbera, DP World, a UAE company, has a 20-year contract to run that port. Part of that, the operations in the port is, there's a share in it by a great friend of the Somalis, the Ethiopians, about 19-20% of the share. They're not friends of the Somalis, okay? Bosasa, the UAE's DP World wants a 30-year contract in Bosasa. Not tied up yet, but almost tied up. So we look at these ports here, okay? The red ones are ports. The black ones are, the black dots are, sorry, it's not very clear. I thought it would be clearer. The black ones are military bases, okay? So if you look at Djibouti here, this little piece, Djibouti has military bases of the United States. It has a military base of the UAE. It has a military base of China. It has a military base of Japan. The largest one, of course, being the American one, the AFRICOM base, which is the largest base on the African continent. Right there at that choke point into the Red Sea. Right? And then you go up here, and there's all these military bases. This is a Saudi base, that's an Egyptian base, etc. But the control of these ports is extremely important from a geopolitical perspective. Now, you also know that, I'm sure all of you know the recent big news about Yemen. The Southern Transitional Council took over the southern part and the eastern part of Yemen, supported by the UAE, and then the Saudis bombed their ship that was bringing arms, and now the Saudis and the Emiratis are not very happy friends. So what's the point of this? The point of this is that the United Arab Emirates wants to be able to control this entire part here, as well as this entire part here, giving it complete control over the Gulf of Aden and that choke point, Bab el-Mandab, into the Red Sea. Okay? And the United Arab Emirates, for those who might not know, and if you don't, I would be very surprised, is the closest Arab friend of Israel. To the extent that, you know, we often say that with most of these Arab states that are friends of Israel, it's the friendliness is at a governmental level. The people generally are pro-Palestinian, except the United Arab Emirates. In the UAE, that Zionist feeling is an ordinary person's thing. You have people posting on social media, Emirati families inviting a settler family from an illegal settlement in Palestine to come and join them for a meal. Okay? This is the UAE. So when we look at the recognition of Somaliland by Israel, it is within this context that those two ports in Somaliland and Puntland are basically controlled by its ally, the UAE. On the other side, that Yemen part, it's not, but the UAE tried to have control over that. It's not because the Saudis have prevented that from happening. And what that means is that gives that alliance, Israel-UAE alliance, control over that area, over the entrance into the Red Sea. Now, if you think this is far-fetched, there are now reports done and leaked documents from the UAE offering, in the past 2 years, offering Israel support in its genocide against the Palestinians. When I say support, I'm not talking about diplomatic support, material, financial support. The UAE is determined to crush the Palestinian resistance. The UAE is determined to crush resistance in any parts of these, in any of these countries. So the UAE and Israel, for purposes of this discussion, are essentially one unit in that area. So the Saudi, I'm now moving away from Somaliland. This was my brief that I should use Somaliland issue as a departure for a bigger discussion. So what we saw recently is a very interesting kind of public fallout between Saudi Arabia and the UAE. I say public fallout because it's not a new thing. Let me just. Okay, this is just a quick map of to make my point about Israel's activities on the African continent. You'll see the countries in pink were countries that this map is from 2016. Between 2012 and 2016, bought or sold weapons from or to Israel. Then the blue parts are those that have active trade and diplomatic links with Israel. You see South Africa is there, of course. The green ones, countries that have suspended links with Israel. Of course, this is an old map. Morocco now should be the bluest of the blue, etc. Okay. Okay. So this thing that we saw happen between Saudi Arabia and the UAE is not new. Soon after the UAE and Saudi Arabia joined in the bombardment of Yemen, what, about 10 years ago, the tension started between the two of them. And that's mainly because for the Saudis, they had one agenda. They wanted to crush Ansarullah. Okay? For the UAE, their agenda was to take control over the southern part of control over the southern part of Yemen, so that they could have this unbroken line, in a sense, from them right across into Africa, including the possibility of their oil pipelines going through, etc. Okay. Oh, thank you. Right. This is I should say, a very interesting development, and inshallah the tensions deepen and strengthen. Saudi Arabia also, I should make this point, in many other ways is a little different from the Saudi Arabia we knew of a few years ago. So let me give you two ways in which it is somewhat different. You know the whole idea of the petrodollar. The petrodollar idea starts with the Saudi-American deal. And the deal was that oil would be sold only in US dollars, right? And that has helped the dollar to remain a strong reserve currency. But now, various countries have decided that they don't have to do that. Iran and China, Iran sells lots of oil to China, not in the US dollar, okay, in yuan, or as part of a barter exchange. Saudi Arabia sells oil now to China, not in the US dollar, okay? And part of the reason for this is, particularly after the American withdrawal from Afghanistan, the Saudis decided that, you know, the whole thing about the petrodollar was the Saudis saying, we will make sure that oil is always sold in the US dollar, and in return, you guarantee our security. Saudis decided after this Afghanistan thing that the United States is not loyal to its partners, and they cannot expect to get security from the US anymore. That is why when Xi Jinping, the Chinese president, went to Saudi Arabia to tie up this oil deal for 20 years, that Saudi Arabia would supply it with oil, it was the Saudis who asked Xi to facilitate and mediate an agreement between them and the Iranians. Because if you can't rely for your security on an external power, then the way to guarantee your security is to ensure that you have regional arrangements that guarantee it. And if you have a friendly relationship with the country you thought was your rival, that's probably the best way to do it. That relationship between Saudi Arabia and Iran continues to strengthen. And so in the past week, we saw, for example, Saudi Arabia, not the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and Oman met several times with the US President Trump. The Omanis visited Iran as well to try and convince him that a war against Iran is not a smart thing to do, that it will affect everyone in the region, it will be a regional, cause regional chaos, and it's not a good idea. A few years ago, we would not have expected that Saudi would be part of such a thing. So those two reasons, one is its new kind of relationship with the United States, and the second, its new kind of relationship with Iran, that I'm saying that the Saudi Arabia we look at now is a little different from what we were talking about in the past. Now, since we are talking about the United States, I'm just trying to create linkages between these things. They're all separate things. No, they're not. Okay. Now, you know that the United States has the largest military in the world. Its military spending is more than the next 10 countries put together. China is the second largest, but next 10 countries put together is less than the United States. And part of that is all the bases it has around the world. By this month, it has 750, more than 750 military bases in 80 countries. This includes, of course, various countries in Europe. And I'll talk a little more about it a bit more later. Its largest military base in the Middle East is the one in Qatar, Al Udeid Air Base, but it also has a presence, different forms: Bahrain, Qatar, of course, Bahrain, Kuwait, UAE, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Turkey, and Iraq. The US has bases in all these countries. These are its bases in these countries. There's a base name on the left, the country in the middle, or the city in the middle, and the city in the middle, and the country on the right. All of those, I'm not going to go through that. Okay, this is what American bases look like in the Middle East. Okay, if you look at all of those, they're different kinds of things. So there's the red dots are US-controlled bases in operation for at least 15 years. They've been there for a long time. The orange dots, other sites with US military presence, and the blue triangles, US naval deployment by the middle of last year, June last year. Okay, so you can see all of those, red, orange, and blue. That's the American presence in the Middle East, and going on to that side to Greece, for example, as well, right? So this is what the U.S. looks like in the Middle East. Here's another view of the same kind of thing. Okay, and here's pictures. So on the top left, that's Al Udeid. The one in the middle is in Kuwait. The one on the top right is in the UAE. This one at the bottom here is in Saudi Arabia. That one at the bottom there is Incirlik in Turkey. And the one in the middle is, I think, Bahrain. Okay, I forgot what the middle one was. These are pictures of these American bases. Now, the American the American kind of military activity, of course, as we know, is extremely broad, wide, etc. But there's also changes in how they look at the world. So if you listened carefully in the past couple of weeks, 3 weeks or so, around the time before and around the time of and after the illegal kidnapping of Nicolás Maduro, the president of Venezuela, the American president and his national security advisor, the language they're using is they're not referring to themselves as the policemen of the world, which is, you know, the kind of way that they used to portray themselves in the past. They're talking about our hemisphere, the Western Hemisphere, okay? The North America, South America, and the Pacific, the Western Hemisphere, is what they're referring to as belonging basically to the United States, where they can do whatever they want. And doing whatever they want means things like using excessive amount of force in a foreign country, claiming that your law applies in a foreign country, Venezuela, kidnapping a sitting head of state, all of which are illegal under international law. But that's the position they've taken. But there's also this additional thing now that Trump's been making a big noise about, and that is Greenland. So let me say a word or two about Greenland. Okay, so there's Greenland. Okay, here's Greenland. If you're looking at a globe from the top, this is what it looks like, right? This is Greenland, that's Canada, the United States, the main part of it is down here, but that little bit there that says United States of America, that's Alaska, right? On this side of Greenland, you have these few European countries, Norway there, Finland there, and this whole thing here is Russia. At the top there, where those lines converge, that's a narrow strait. That's basically 84 kilometers of water that separates the United States from Russia. And here, that's China. So the US is separated from Russia by about 84 kilometers of water, separated from China by 84 kilometers of water and a piece of Russia. Right? So when Trump makes this big noise about Greenland, by the way, it's not a new noise. Several presidents in the past have asked Denmark to give Greenland to the United States, which Denmark has refused. And the reasons are the same as for Trump. So one of the reasons, of course, everyone talks about is that Greenland has all these critical minerals. What the US regards as critical minerals, it has a list of 50. Greenland has 43 of them. And as the ice is melting, we might find more of those, okay? So yes, that's one of the things. And of course, the rare earth metals that are part of this category of critical minerals, China has a monopoly on that. So to be able to get your hands on that is important, okay? The second reason is that, so this whole area here, of course, is ice for much of the year, right? For parts of the year, it stops being ice, it melts, and ships can go through. Because of climate change, it is expected that this area here, where this orange line is, this shipping lane, by 2050, will be ice-free throughout the year. But this one here, along the Russian coast, because the ice is melting faster there, will be ice-free in 5 years' time, by 2030. So by 2030, ships can use that to travel throughout the year. For a Chinese ship going to Europe, using this route saves it 4,000 kilometers. Okay? So it's a huge financial issue. On the other side, that shipping lane, Canada has not been very happy to allow other countries to use. And so even the United States has not gotten as free access to that as it might want. So the US is afraid that in this big war it has against China, that China will get economic advantages as climate change continues. Of course, Trump doesn't believe in climate change, but nevertheless, he knows that the ice is going to melt, right? So the whole control of the shipping there is an important factor, and Greenland is right in the middle of that. And the third reason, which I think is the biggest reason, and this is what Trump says. He says we need Greenland for our national security. The third reason is a strategic reason, right? So Greenland being placed where it is, the northern part of Greenland is ideal, and it's not very populated in, very little population in the north, population more in the south, is ideal to set up surveillance bases, to set up air bases, etc., that can respond from their perspective to problems from Russia or from China. Okay? The Danish have said to the Americans, well, if you want, come and set up your bases. We're not going to object. But Trump wants to own it and control it. The Danes, Denmark, by the way, let me just say, up to last year, used to purchase all its weapons from the United States, not even from any other European country, from the United States. In all US wars that have taken place since the Second World War, in which they brought other countries in, Denmark supplied per capita more soldiers than any other country. So they're actually very good friends. But nevertheless, Trump wants Greenland, and so you get it now. This is not just some vanity project. It's not because it looks nice. It's because Greenland is that important to Trump. So, having said that, I spoke about Venezuela and Greenland. Let's move to the other issue that has been in the news in Trump's target over the past few weeks at least, and that is, of course, Iran. So everyone knows, 3 weeks ago, protests started in Iran because of the extremely high cost of living, the weakness of the Iranian rial. Economic conditions are really bad in Iran. And well, the fact that it took this long for us to be able to say really bad in Iran is a wonder in itself for a country that has lived for 47 years under sanctions. You know that if you want to do business in Iran, you basically have to take a suitcase of money because the banking system doesn't deal with Iran, okay? So under sanctions for 47 years, those sanctions have started biting. It started biting a long time ago, of course, but there was a temporary kind of reprieve in the time when the Iran nuclear deal, the JCPOA, was in operation, and so there was some sanctions relief. We know that Trump in his first term pulled out of the JCPOA, and then last year the European states invoked a clause in the deal to snap sanctions back. And so all of the sanctions that were somewhat alleviated in that period have been re-implemented from around September last year. And so from September to now, the Iranian economic situation has been extremely bad. So well, you expect that people take to the streets and get upset and angry. By the way, Iran has almost as many protests per day as we do in South Africa. But like in South Africa, you don't know that there was a protest in Lusikisiki yesterday. I don't know whether there was. I'm just making it up, right? Because it was a local protest. It was a protest by workers, or it was a protest because people didn't have water or electricity or whatever. Occasionally, these things spill over and become regional or national, right? In Iran, they have protests all the time. So, you might say Iran is a repressive state, etc., but the fact that they have protests every day says something about something. But this one, because of the difficult situation, spilled over, became nationwide. And one of the things that we saw, 2 days it was after the protest started, the president, and this is something that's a little different from in the past. The president made a statement saying, acknowledging that the protesters had legitimate grievances, that this stuff you're talking about, the high cost of living, etc., it's real, it's true, and we need to do something about it. He's the head of government, okay? 1 week after the protest started, the supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, made a similar statement. Now, usually with these kind of protests, Ali Khamenei doesn't, the government has to deal with it. He's kind of above that. But he made a statement saying the same kinds of things. But about 9 or 10 days after that, we saw this massive, so Wednesday, Thursday last week, this massive introduction into the protests of other elements. The result of those other elements are that more than 100 masajid have been burnt or bombed in Iran. close to 200 police people have been shot at and killed. Firefighters have been shot at. Fire engines and ambulances have been bombed. Hospitals and banks have been bombed, etc. Right? So who are these other elements? A few different elements. One is there's a Kurdish armed group in Iran, the PAK, and you know what I said earlier on about this issue, that have been boasting in the past few days that they have armed people on the streets and they're taking action against the state. The other is Iran has a tiny 2, 3, 4% Baluch population. There's a Baluch armed group that wants independence for their little enclave, have been on the streets in different areas as well. Not all over the country, but in particular areas. And then there's clearly there's also, it's now come to light, there are people that have been paid by this rebel organization, essentially now a cult, the Mujahideen Khalq organization, based in Albania, I think, but people have been paid from Germany to instigate in the protests. And we now know that there have been elements that are either actual Israeli Mossad agents or Iranians paid by the Israeli Mossad. And we know that because Mossad told us, apart from the Iranians telling us as well, but they also said so, as did the former CIA head, Mike Pompeo. And so the result of that, the protests are now over. I mean, people have been asking, the protests for about 4 or 5 days now have been over. And the reason why they're over is partly because after the armed attacks by these groups, the government took a hard line and cracked down. I don't know which government would be happy about 200 of its policemen being killed. Partly because, well, frankly, you can't have protests just going on for weeks and weeks, and people also have to work and earn a living and feed their families. And partly because a large number of the protesters could no longer felt comfortable in a protest that was targeting masajid and police and hospitals, etc., and so withdrew. So the protests are now over. But the crisis is not over, and I'm going to end on this note. I spoke longer than we wanted me to, right? The crisis is not over. From the Iranian perspective, there's a genuine belief, and I think that it's a well-grounded belief, that they're facing a possible attack from Israel and or the United States. So a week ago already, Iran issued this thing that's called a Notice to Air Missions, called NOTAM. Basically, what it does is it instructs all airlines that in this particular area you're not allowed to fly. Okay? It creates a no-fly zone. There are various parts of Iran now that have been declared in this way by these NOTAMs, including virtually the whole of Tehran. The two main airports in Iran, Imam Khomeini International and Mehrabad, both in Tehran, are virtually non-operational because of this. Now, no country does this just because it seems like a nice thing. The economic and other cost of it is huge. But you do it if you're expecting to have an air attack. And that is what Iran is actually expecting at the moment. So having this no-fly zone, I mean, basically what it means is that the guy who's handling the anti-aircraft gun, any aircraft flies in that particular space, he shoots without having to get authorization to do so, because nothing should be flying in that space except birds. So Iran is at the moment on basically a war footing. And there are many people who believe that we could expect an Israeli attack within the next week. Over the past 2 or 3 days, we've seen the Israeli discourse changing and them saying things like, well, there's no real point in attacking Iran now because one is because the protests have been crushed, so there's no support on the ground anymore, and secondly because we don't think that this is The conditions are right for regime change. So, but you know, I think that that's probably subterfuge. It's the Israelis trying to lull the world into a false sense before they attack. Whether the United States wants to join that attack or not is a bit unclear. I think that the US doesn't want to, but I also think that they could be dragged into it by Israel. So I'm ending on this note that as much as we're talking about things on our continent, the world really is going to pot. We could have a war in that region in the next few days. And if it happens, Iran has threatened that if the US gets involved, they will attack American bases in the region. And that's why I put that thing up with the American bases. 10,000 soldiers in Al Udeid in Qatar. 1,500 soldiers, American soldiers in Iraq. 1,000 American soldiers in Syria, all within stone throwing distance of Iran. Thank you.
Shukran, Naeem, for that fairly well presented geopolitical map of issues and putting really the puzzle together, and how some of us always think these issues are isolated, you know, and it's all interconnected. Even if, whether it's our people protesting here for basic freedoms, etc., all these things are very much interconnected, and I'm glad. That's why I gave him a bit of extra time, you know, so that we can have a very clear perspective of where the world is moving towards. And the world is moving towards a very, we're going to experience a very scary world very soon. And that is because very dangerous people are now in charge of the world. But these agendas, of course, its foundations has been laid for a very, very long time. And once again, I want to thank the two speakers, Abdul Rahman and Naeem, for the input, and I hope it has enriched our understanding both of the issues and the global politics and what's to come. So we're going to, I think, Hilal TV and our online YouTube channel. I think we will have a cutoff at 4 o'clock. I'm not sure if that is still the case, Ahmed, but that is what we were told. And if that happens, we say Assalamu alaikum to our viewers online and on Hilal TV. And once again, we say also shukran to Hilal TV for streaming this live for us, this very, very important debate. Now, we're going to take some questions and answers, but as I said, please keep our questions and answers very brief. If there is very little questions, we can, of course, entertain. But other than that, please try to be as brief. Just give me as a show of hands. Sabira will manage the mic for us. And there's Mr. Kasim there. Just raise your hand. Okay, can I maybe see another hand whilst and there's Nadeem and Shafiq. So we got that three questions, one there and one here. Where's that other mic?
Shall I go? Okay. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Thank you to the MYM for organizing this really interesting event. I'll get right to it. Naeem, thank you very much for your opening remark.